Carlos Alcaraz is greedy, absolutely, unapologetically greedy. After that epic 5.5 hour semifinal war against Alexander Zverev, a match that would have broken most players physically and mentally, Alcaraz proved he just cannot help himself when it comes to winning instant classic five-set matches. But what he did in the Australian Open final took that greed to a whole other stratospheric level that has the entire tennis world losing their minds. He was already the youngest man to reach world number one, already the youngest to win majors on all three different surfaces. But now, with this absolutely stunning Australian Open finals victory over Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz has become the youngest player in history to achieve the career Grand Slam at just 22 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. 22 years old, and he's already accomplished what legends spend their entire careers chasing. The scoreline tells only part of the story. 2-6, 6-2, 6-3, 7-5. A comeback victory over the greatest player of all time in one of the most pressure-packed situations imaginable on the biggest stage in tennis. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement, a changing of the guard, a moment that will be replayed and analyzed for generations. This win doesn't just put Alcaraz among the greats. It puts him in his own stratosphere of greatness, a place where very few athletes in any sport ever reach. What you're about to read is a complete breakdown of how Carlos stormed back from losing the first set badly, how he systematically dismantled Djokovic's game, why this victory represents something far bigger than just another trophy, and why the tennis world is now forced to reckon with the reality that we might be watching the future GOAT in real time. Novak Djokovic could not have asked for a better start to this final. He came out absolutely firing, playing what he himself described in his post-match press conference as one of the best sets he's produced in the past couple of years. And the statistics back up that claim completely. Djokovic was utterly dominant on his serve in that opening set, dropping only 2 points behind his first serve and winning a staggering 93% of first serve points. To put that in perspective, his tournament average coming into the final was 76%. He was peaking at exactly the right time, redlining in the most important match of the year. Meanwhile, Alcaraz was struggling significantly. He won just one of 8 second serve points in that opening set, a catastrophic conversion rate that reflected just how dominant Djokovic was from the baseline. The 38-year-old wasn't just serving well, he was crushing ground strokes, dictating play, moving Alcaraz around like a puppet. Interestingly, Carlos himself said afterward that he felt he actually played well in the first set, despite losing at 6-2. He pointed out that he had more winners than Djokovic, 10-8, though several of those were drop shots rather than power winners. But the reality was undeniable. Novak was in complete control of the points despite hitting fewer winners. His forehand was absolutely singing, hitting so cleanly and with such depth and pace that Alcaraz couldn't establish any offensive rhythm. Djokovic's forehand had been a massive weapon in his semifinal victory against Jannik Sinner, but somehow he was hitting it even better in this first set against Alcaraz. The ball was coming off his strings like thunder, deep and heavy, pushing Alcaraz way behind the baseline and forcing defensive responses. The first set went to Djokovic 6-2, and suddenly all the pressure that had been building around Alcaraz's quest for the career Grand Slam felt suffocating. Was he going to crumble? Was the moment too big? Was Djokovic going to add one more miraculous chapter to his legendary career? Then something shifted in the second set, and what happened next showcased exactly why Carlos Alcaraz is so special, why he's different from every other talented young player who's come before him. Alcaraz played somewhat better in the second set, but honestly, the dramatic swing in momentum was due more to a significant dip from Djokovic than a massive elevation from Carlos. Djokovic's first serve percentage plummeted 20 percentage points, dropping from 78% to just 58%. His return game, which had been suffocating in the first set with an 85% success rate of getting returns in play, collapsed to just 52% in the second. Critically, Djokovic's forehand, the weapon that had been absolutely money in the first set, started breaking down. He began making unforced errors at crucial moments, shots that had been automatic 30 minutes earlier suddenly sailing long or catching the net. That contributed directly to him getting broken for the first time at 1-all in the second set. But Djokovic still had chances to wrestle back control even after getting broken. He earned a break point at 2-1 in the second set, a golden opportunity to get back on serve and reset the momentum. But he sent a forehand down the line wayward at the crucial moment, and Alcaraz later said in his press conference that those errors from Novak helped him feel more comfortable and calm, helped him settle into the match emotionally. It's also simply difficult to maintain an extraordinarily high level of tennis for extended periods, especially at 38 years old against an opponent with Alcaraz's speed and defensive ability. And you have to give enormous credit to Carlos, who made a crucial tactical adjustment. He started hitting with considerably more topspin on his forehand, giving Djokovic a different look, more shape on the ball, making it harder for Novak to time his shots perfectly and dictate with that dangerous forehand. The second set statistics tell a devastating story for Djokovic. Just 3 winners compared to 11 unforced errors. That's not just a bad ratio, that's a collapse. And it became increasingly clear that Djokovic was struggling physically, something he subtly alluded to in his post-match press conference. When asked what changed after the first set, Djokovic gave a characteristically classy but revealing answer. "Look, I never like to talk about things that I go through physically or health-wise because it's going to come across as I'm looking for excuses and taking away credit from the winner, which is not going to change this time. I'm just going to congratulate Carlos. He was the deserved winner on the court today." That's pure class from Djokovic, refusing to make excuses while subtly acknowledging that something wasn't quite right physically. And Alcaraz clearly sensed it. In the third set, Carlos did a brilliant job of testing Novak's movement even more aggressively. He deployed more drop shots, forcing Djokovic to sprint forward and recover, taxing those 38-year-old legs. He used the forehand angle shot exceptionally well, pulling Djokovic wide and then exploiting the open court. Djokovic started making unforced errors on his forehand when pulled wide, shots that had been rock solid against Sinner in the semifinals. Djokovic's service level continued its drastic decline in the second and third sets. After winning 93% of first serve points in the opening set, he plummeted to just 51% in the second and third sets combined. That's not a dip, that's a free fall. Alcaraz definitely got a much better read on Djokovic's serve patterns as the match progressed, and his absolutely elite anticipation skills allowed him to transition from defense to offense much quicker. But Djokovic was also simply misfiring, missing shots he'd been making consistently against Sinner. Perhaps fatigue was forcing him to pull the trigger earlier than optimal, trying to shorten points to conserve energy. In hindsight, Djokovic probably should have incorporated significantly more serve and volley tactics to shorten rallies and save his legs. He only attempted it a handful of times, but when he did, he had pretty good success. That approach might have also made Alcaraz second-guess his return positioning and kept Carlos off balance. Djokovic later said he didn't feel like he regained his energy until midway through the fourth set. One massive boost came from an absolutely heroic moment, saving 6 break points in his opening service game of the fourth set. Had he lost that game, the match would have effectively been over. To Alcaraz's credit, he didn't do much wrong on most of those breakpoint opportunities except on his fifth chance, when he sent a neutral forehand long. Most of those saved breakpoints came down to Djokovic summoning championship-level shot-making when his back was against the wall. The kind of clutch tennis that's defined his entire career. Undeterred, Alcaraz kept taking care of business on his serve, as did Djokovic, whose first serve percentage improved to 72% in the fourth set. Both men cruised on serve for the next 5 games until Carlos got a good love 30 look on Djokovic's serve at 4-3. He pushed Novak to deuce in that crucial game, but Djokovic survived with some incredible defensive scrambling. After winning several points in the following game at 4-all with exceptional defense, Djokovic earned his first break opportunity since early in the second set. This was his moment to seize control, to force a fifth set, to make the young Spaniard doubt himself. But the GOAT blinked. He got a comfortable second serve look, a ball that landed just beyond the service box. but he pulled up off the forehand and it sailed long. That was his lifeline, and it slipped away. The very next point, Alcaraz hit an absolutely ridiculous forehand angle winner, a shot so perfectly placed that Djokovic couldn't even move toward it. Alcaraz held serve, and Djokovic would win only one more service point for the rest of the match. The final nail in Djokovic's coffin came on the very first point of the final game, with Novak serving to stay in the match at 5-6. The two warriors engaged in a brutal, grueling 24-shot rally that Alcaraz eventually won. Both players were visibly winded afterward, bent over and gasping for air. But Djokovic looked absolutely gassed, like he had nothing left in the tank, and he struggled to recover from that point both physically and mentally. He served and volleyed on a second serve the very next point, clearly trying to end points quickly, and he won that point. But his first serve completely deserted him in the final game, and so did his forehand. He committed 3 terrible forehand unforced errors in that game alone, his body and his shots breaking down simultaneously under the weight of exhaustion and pressure. And in an almost poetic ending, he finished the match with yet another forehand down-the-line error, giving Alcaraz the championship on a mistake rather than a winner. Let me give you my overall thoughts on this match because context matters when evaluating historic finals. I think it was a genuinely good match, though perhaps not an instant all-time classic. We saw some incredible moments of both players trading physical and mental blows, playing exceptional tennis simultaneously. Some of the rallies were absolutely magnificent, showcasing the highest level of athletic and tactical excellence. Just the age difference alone makes this match remarkable. 16 years separating these competitors. Someone who's 22 and someone who's 38 producing such high-quality tennis is a treat in itself, something we should appreciate and never take for granted. I think the match met most people's expectations, though maybe not everyone's. If I were rating this final on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it maybe a 7.8. I think if it had gone to 5 sets, it had the potential to be a truly classic match, something ranked among the greatest finals ever. It's not an instant classic, but given the historical significance and what was at stake, the career Grand Slam for Alcaraz, a record 25th major for Djokovic, it's definitely significant. We're absolutely going to look back on this match for decades. What's fascinating is the contrast with the women's final. The match between Aryna Sabalenka and Elena Rybakina had only 8 points that went 9 shots or longer. By comparison, early in the second set of the men's final, Djokovic and Alcaraz had already played 14 points of 9+ shots. The difference in rally tolerance and defensive ability is staggering. I think the roof being partially open played a significant role in producing longer rallies, creating cooler, slower conditions that favored defensive players like Alcaraz. Interestingly, Carlos actually complained after winning the second set because the umpire made the decision to close the arena's roof slightly more without properly consulting the players. I think some of his frustration came from preferring the open roof conditions, which suited his defensive skills perfectly. I want to give enormous credit to Novak Djokovic for how gracious he was in defeat. He doesn't get nearly enough recognition for this quality, but he was exceptionally gracious in his runner-up speech, delivering one of the best finalist speeches you'll ever hear. He cracked jokes about looking forward to the next 10 years of rivalry with Alcaraz, showing both humor and genuine respect. And he gave a beautiful nod to his greatest rival, Rafael Nadal, who was sitting in the stands watching. That moment felt like absolute destiny, a perfect full-circle moment. Because Nadal won his first Australian Open title at 22 years old on February 1st, as did Roger Federer. Now, Nadal watched Alcaraz not only win his first Australian Open title at 22 years old on February 1st, but watched him shatter Nadal's own record. Rafa had held the previous Open-era record as the youngest to complete the career Grand Slam, accomplishing it at 24 when he won the 2010 US Open. Now his fellow Spaniard has surpassed him by 2 full years. Nadal said before the match that he doesn't really care about records, that those things don't matter much to him. But I noticed he looked slightly disappointed at match point when Alcaraz sealed the victory. I initially wondered if maybe he was rooting for Djokovic, but I think more likely he just wanted to see more tennis, wanted the match to continue like the rest of us. Focusing back on Djokovic, this was an outstanding tournament for him despite the final result. Obviously, he'll be disappointed he didn't win that record 25th major, but he also exceeded his own expectations, which he acknowledged in his press conference. He wasn't even sure he'd play in another Grand Slam final at this stage of his career, so you have to give him enormous credit for not only making this final, but beating Jannik Sinner in the semifinals and pushing Alcaraz to 4 competitive sets at 38 years old. This honestly felt like fate. If there was ever going to be a perfect opportunity for Djokovic to win that 25th major, it would have been this tournament. He got a walkover in an early round and played only 2.5 sets against Lorenzo Musetti before Lorenzo retired injured. The draw opened up beautifully for him, but now I genuinely wonder, will he have another chance like this? His level was exceptional, particularly against Sinner, but the biggest issue was clearly physical. At 38, he's not getting any younger, and he even mentioned in the press conference that he wasn't feeling his best as the match wore on. He looked completely exhausted in that final game. Regardless, that Sinner victory will go down in history as one of his greatest accomplishments, even without the title. And honestly, I was probably pulling for Sinner slightly more in that semifinal, but looking back, I'm actually glad Djokovic won, because we desperately needed a break from Sinner-Alcaraz Grand Slam finals. We needed some variety to truly appreciate what we're witnessing between those two incredible young players. That would have been their 4th straight slam final if Sinner had won, and getting Djokovic in the final instead, delivered by the GOAT himself, felt significant and right. Speaking of Sinner, I've already seen comparisons on social media asking whether Alcaraz would have beaten Djokovic if Novak had played at the level he displayed against Sinner. It's a fair question. Djokovic obviously didn't play his absolute best in the final. But as Rafael Nadal loves to say, if. You can't build arguments on hypotheticals. More importantly, Alcaraz did significantly more things than Sinner did to make Djokovic uncomfortable. The biggest difference was Alcaraz's defense, which is simply much stronger than Sinner's. Carlos incorporated more defensive slices to disrupt Djokovic's rhythm, something Sinner could have utilized far more effectively. That backhand slice from Alcaraz was a huge weapon in this match. He drew numerous forehand unforced errors from Djokovic using that shot. Sinner might want to watch this match carefully and take notes because he's often said he's trying to incorporate more variety. After losing to Alcaraz at the US Open, he specifically mentioned being too predictable. But clearly he's still too predictable against elite opponents. Yes, Sinner used some drop shots against Djokovic, but not nearly enough. Alcaraz went to that well far more frequently and effectively. Sinner was too willing to trade baseline rallies with Djokovic, doing similar patterns repeatedly, essentially playing into Novak's strengths rather than disrupting his rhythm. Carlos is simply a better defensive player than Sinner overall. There was one particular point at 1-love, 15-love in the 4th set that was my absolute favorite of the entire match. Alcaraz was defending for his life, his court coverage and speed on full display. His athleticism is honestly bar none. He is unquestionably the best athlete in tennis right now, period. And that's ultimately why he won this title. This performance fully proved just how complete a player Alcaraz has become. He's the most complete player in the sport right now, which is exactly why he's world number 1. And I have to give him enormous credit for recovering so brilliantly from that grueling 5.5-hour semifinal battle against Zverev. We often take for granted just how well Alcaraz recovers from brutal matches. He recovered exceptionally from beating Sinner in that exhausting Roland Garros final, coming back to win Queen's Club very soon after. And after that 5.5-hour war against Zverev, he came out and played magnificent tennis against Djokovic. Not many players could have done that. Yes, not dropping a set en route to the final helped preserve energy, but still, if you put most other players in his shoes, they wouldn't have performed nearly as well physically. This match further confirmed that Alcaraz is simply in a league of his own. His game has evolved tremendously. He always seems to have something new in his arsenal, a new weapon, a new tactical adjustment. At the US Open final against Sinner, he employed an all-out attacking game brilliantly, serving excellently and displaying incredible volleying and touch. Here at the Australian Open, he showed he could dial it back and play more defensively when conditions demanded it. Yes, we saw offensive brilliance, but the defense truly shone in this match. and it was critically important given the slower, colder conditions. Alcaraz is also on another level mentally, which might actually be his greatest attribute. He dealt with the enormous pressure of pursuing the career Grand Slam exceptionally well. This was massive, suffocating pressure because he'd been talking about this goal publicly for so long. The way he handled the entire Zverev semifinal while cramping and exhausted was exceptional. But the way he performed against Djokovic, managing pressure in history-defining moments, is truly like no other player. He goes about it smiling through tension, finding genuine joy in the biggest moments. He truly embodies the concept that pressure is a privilege. No one smiles this much during pressure-packed moments in matches that define legacies. No one. I genuinely think his nickname should be the Smiling Assassin, because people look at him and think he's goofy or not serious enough. For a long time, the conversation around Alcaraz was whether he could get down to business, whether he could win matches without mental lapses. The US Open proved he could. The Australian Open further proved it and showcased his tremendous growth as both a player and a young man. Deep down beneath that smile, he has an absolutely relentless competitive spirit. He also silenced countless critics who wrote him off after splitting with coach Juan Carlos Ferrero. Many people said he'd never reach the same heights without Juan Carlos. That criticism clearly motivated him.